Welcome back to the podcast where we ask the question, what makes you happy? My name is Jake Pearson, and our guest today is an author and impact venture capitalist who invests in companies that have impact baked into their business model. Eva Yazhari from Dallas, Texas, United States. How are you?
I'm great. I'm doing very well. Great to be here with you, Jake.
Pleasure to have you today. And I would just like to start with what makes you happy. Do you mind sharing that with us?
What makes me happy is contributing beyond myself.
Mm-hmm.
It is the ability to have meaning with all my resources. It's a journey that I've been on for the past, I would say, 12 years since I left Wall Street.
Mm-hmm.
But what truly makes me happy is using my skills to line up with my values.
And when did you realize that was what made you happy, using your skills to line up with your values?
So I actually have a family history of doing just that. My grandfather started a medical hospital in Tanzania many decades ago, and he was an MD, he was a doctor, and he decided to set up the hospital and move his entire family to Africa as a way to have an impact on the world. But I also grew up as an outsider in New York City. So I grew up in a place called Staten Island. There's definitely an archetype of a Staten Island girl out there. And it's a place that is very close, but very far from Manhattan and Wall Street. And I didn't speak the language of money, but I happened to, by luck, enter the world of finance and learn that language quite well. And I realized that there isn't a connection necessarily between values and money. And I started to really think about how doing so for myself as a start could really make me happy. And I wake up every day feeling extremely aligned. And Jake, as you mentioned, I invest in companies that have impact baked into their business models. In other words, they are purpose-driven businesses as well.
I really love that. And I can just see how that's come from back when your grandfather built the, medical center in a way, or the hospital. Like, that's part of your upbringing, your whole story. And so I love that you've been able to align your values with that into what you do for, a living as well. So that's incredible. So what would you say to, our listeners, if, say, one of them came up to you on the street or passing by and you had a short conversation with them and they mentioned that they were struggling with their happiness tied to, their finances maybe, what would your advice be?
Anyone struggling with their happiness deserves a little bit of kindness. But what I would really say is, when it comes to your finances, do you know what your values are? And do you know what you own in line with those values? Have you thought about not only your consumer choices, which is quite low-hanging fruit, but have you also thought about where you are investing? Have you thought about maybe where you're banking? Are all of these relationships lined up with who you are as a person? And if so, think about how that makes you feel good. If not, maybe make some changes and start to speak a language of wealth being more than money. Because I think a lot of people tend to be unhappy because they're chasing wealth and but they're seeing it as just money. And so what I would really say is try to find some meaning in all your resources. And when you feel more connected, you feel happy. And one last thing to share is that it's proven by Harvard Business School research that the greedier and stingier you become, the less happy you are. So if we can all line up with common goals, with making our world better, I believe that we'll feel more connected and happy. And I certainly am evidence of that.
I really love that. And I know that from my personal experience, when I've aligned myself to not just think about money as my only source of wealth, but other things in my life that contribute to the wealth of my happiness and myself, I feel infinitely more aligned and more happy with my own life and my direction. So very much resonate with what you're saying, Eva. Thank you for sharing all things that make you happy. We really do appreciate your insights, your advice, and your time.
Thanks for listening to the podcast. We hope it gives you something to think about on your quest to discover what makes you happy. Make sure to check out whatmakesyouhappypodcast.com to connect with today's guest and follow us on all our social media platforms and to stay up to date at what's happening next at What Makes You Happy. Don't forget to share this episode with a friend, and we'll see you next time.